Excellent. Well, why don't we actually bring up our panelists, and then I will introduce them as we get along. So we have an extraordinary panel today. We have Minister Majda Adžović, the Minister of Public Works for Montenegro. Hello, welcome. We have with us Alfredo Longo, the CEO of Monterock. Good to have you, Alfredo. Manfredi Lefebvre do Video, the chairman of the World Travel and Tourism Council, and also executive chairman of the Heritage Group. We have Cherie Blair with us, the founder and chair of Omnia Strategy. Hello. And last but certainly not least, we have Rikard Attias, the chairman of the executive committee and the acting CEO of the Future Investment Initiative Institute.
We talk about it.
I think Biljana opened up with a very clear message this morning. This summit was built on a simple but very important premise. The Adriatic region has now gotten to a moment where its ambition and the world's capital need to be in the same room having an honest conversation. And that is what we are going to do over the next 3 days. And that conversation starts right here this morning. I hear a lot of optimism. We're all optimistic, but we're not really here for optimism. We're here for clarity. This region has got some real assets. It has a strategic geographic location. It has plenty of talent. It has energy resources, plenty resources. And as we heard, it has now an accelerated pathway towards European integration. But we need to be realistic. The region also has its fair challenges. There are institutional gaps, there are still execution risks, and there is a persistent difficulty of breaking in and getting the attention of global capital allocators, those who look at the world in its entirety. But I think that the people that we have on the panel today, they have each in their own fields navigated precisely this tension. I think they represent a pretty comprehensive spectrum of what it takes to move the dialogue from conversation into actual capital commitment across private equity, institutional investments, what it takes in terms of the legal expertise, convening the capital, and also, of course, the government's perspective. And there's no better place to have this conversation than right here today. And I'm saying this because just a few kilometers away, where we are sitting here today, Manfredi Stefan is preparing to now open its doors again after 5 years of renovation, which is not just a hospitality story. It sends a very clear signal of where this region is actually going. And I must say, on a personal note, as somebody who has sat on both sides of this table, both as an investor for infrastructure projects, but also chairing state-owned enterprises, not only are these questions very close to my heart, but I've also seen very much up front what happens when you get it right and when you get it wrong. When you create immense value or where delays and complications erode that value. So, I have many questions for my panel. I hope we can get through all of them. So I will not ask for opening statements. What I will ask is, of course, that you're all concise in your answers, but even more importantly, feel free to be provocative. So let's get started. Let me start with Alfredo. Monterock has deployed capital in a lot of very complicated markets around the world. And your work here in Montenegro with Manfredi Stefan I think, is a very concrete example of how you operate and that commitment. Tell us briefly, in terms of the structural conditions in the region, regulatory, institutional, what do you think determines whether the serious capital comes, looks, and stays, or walks away?
Thank you. Very pleased to be here again. I think that the real answer, at least to what concerns private capital, is the predictability of execution. When you assess capital nesting and landing in complex environment, not only you underwrite opportunity, which is part of any financial analysis, you underwrite a process. So how complex is this process, and effectively how will be delivered into existence of a project. Complexity, pardon the thing, complexity is easy in a way. I mean, yesterday we had the opportunity to have a very interesting dinner with Manfredi and Rikard with, giants, national champions. Majda, there was also minister here, Exim Bank, you had, very, very excellency, the owner of EMAR. Complexity is what we master every day. No one is afraid of complexity. People are very afraid of uncertainty. And when you remove the uncertainty from the equation, capital immediately find its own spot. And Adria is a perfect example for this, and Montenegro, and Sveti Stefan. Thanks to the excellent, I have to say, support of the regulatory system by the current government, the Prime Minister, the Minister, and the whole cabinet, there have been a connection of intent whereby uncertainty has been removed, and immediately this released into the Sveti Stefan being reopened. So it's long-term capital, is plus 200 million. We have been there as an investor for plus 10 years, and we are willing and bringing to have the name back, the operations back, coupled with other international brands that they were coming, which will bring an opportunity immediately to cement and have the growth forward that this country needs.
So complexity can be managed, but the predictability, which is not fully in our control, is something that we need to know what it is. So let me move to Rikard. So you convene some of the world's largest sovereign and capital allocators. They get pitched opportunities and stories from all over the world all the time. What does it actually take then to get this region onto their agenda as an opportunity for stable and predictable long-term returns?
Okay, so first of all, allow me to thank our host and the great organizer, Biljana, for this great summit, and very privileged to be with these esteemed friends and panelists. I will talk to you with one of my hats. One of my hats is to humbly advise government leaders on how to diversify their economy, how to bring foreign direct investment, and by doing so, you build your legacy. So we need, investors don't have time to lose. Time is money. They are very pragmatic. So it's not about the storytelling or the narrative or the advertising that you will spend millions to promote your country, that it's a beautiful country, because every leader thinks that his or her country is the most beautiful, the most attractive, and you can put your money in my country. To come back to being pragmatic, I think there are 3 rules. Number 1, bankability. You need to present projects which are bankable. This is why you need to do the studies before, and you come with something very pragmatic. This project, this is what will be the return of investment. This is how many jobs we will create. This is how it will be an inclusive growth for the country. Because today investors want finally to invest with purpose more and more, because we are scrutinized. The money should go and create impact. Point number one. Point number two, Biljana said it in her opening remarks, trust. Trust is absolutely essential. People will come to Montenegro or next door because they trust their point of contact. They will trust the prime minister. They will trust the ministers. It's a business and relationship. They will trust the minister of investment. It's extremely important. Like any relationship is built on trust, as you say, the new currency, because trust brings sustainability. Number three, which is extremely important, scalability. You cannot invest on project. You have to invest now more and more on, I would say, ecosystems. So if you look at Montenegro or many other countries, they have 5-6 sectors which present great opportunities. Tourism, okay, not just go to invest in a hotel. I'm sure that Alfredo will be aligned with me, and Manfredi. You have to invest in a tourism ecosystem. You will go to energy. You will not just, I see great players like Majda who invested here. They will invest not in one project, they will invest in an energy corridor. If you go to, for example, logistics, you have to invest in a logistic hub. So you need to come with a vision, and so far and so on. So I think it's not, to summarize the answer to your question, it's not about storytelling or narrative. It's about really putting the country on the radar of investors because you have a long-term vision. Money goes when you have a 5-10 years vision. This is why in Saudi Arabia, country I know very well, you have Vision 2030. In the UAE now, we are going even further, Vision 2035, even Vision 2040. And I think this is a best thing that Montenegro should do, is to come, maybe it's existing already, sorry for my ignorance, is to have a vision and to promote the vision more than promoting the assets. Yeah. Don't sell assets, sell a vision, promote a vision. This is how you will have long-term relationship.
I think that's a very visionary view of a vision. So thank you for that, Richard. And thank you. And I will pick up on one of the things you spoke about, the ecosystem, how it all hangs together, which I think brings me seamlessly to you, Cherie. You've spent your career in this intersection where actually it all hangs together, of law, governance, investment, advising both investor and state on dispute when it doesn't work, but also on how to move forward, and also importantly on sort of the broader context of human rights and the rule of law. So how do you see the rule of law element actually playing a role then in this region today from the perspective of the growth and FDI attraction?
Well, I think we've heard already that capital doesn't fear risks. It fears unpredictability, or as you said, uncertainty. And that's why legal and regulatory framework matters so much. And the World Bank, in fact, has said that 86% of investors identify that as critical. But, you know, investors don't invest or consider the rule of law as some kind of abstract idea. They want to know how it works in practice. And they're not looking for perfection, but for consistency, for fairness, and reliability. Trust, as you said, Richard. They need to know decisions will be principled, contracts will be respected, and if something goes wrong, there's a system that they can trust. So we're not here talking about the absence of laws. Many countries have many laws and strong frameworks in writing, but the real question is, how do they operate day to day? And I think there are 3 pressure points for investors. The first one is administrative decision-making. Minister, I'm sure you're familiar with this. starts at the beginning, doesn't it? Permits, license, land rights. You mentioned Sveti Stefan. That's beach rights, but similar things. If processes are opaque, inconsistent, or slow, then capital's not going to be attracted. Secondly, there's about dispute resolution and enforcement. Now, investors are realistic. There will be disputes because that's life. It's not so much how that there won't be disputes, it's how they need to have the confidence, not uncertainty, in dispute resolution and enforcement. And third, they need consistency over time. Because capital is long term. The sort of projects you were talking about, you're advising about, are not here today and gone tomorrow. And if rules shift unpredictably, then advisors will either investors will price that in, or they'll just walk away and not bother. But, certainty doesn't mean stasis, because laws have to evolve and governments have to respond to changing priorities. Governments cannot guarantee that the law of 10 years ago is still going to be the law tomorrow, let alone in 10 years in the future. And we see this particularly in relation to things like environmental protection, to the various economic realities, the ups and downs, and we're seeing a bit of downs at the moment. We see it in resource sectors such as mining. Projects agreed under one framework can later face new environmental requirements, or in response to national and international crises where sudden price escalation, interest rate shocks, wider economic disruption, governments sometimes have to intervene to protect the public in ways that do affect commercial arrangements. So the issue isn't that change happens, because it must, it's how change is managed. And so investors are looking for predictable evolution that's transparent, that's proportionate, and consistently applied. And I think in this region, the fundamentals are strong. You've got geography, you've got talent, and you've got a clear EU trajectory. The opportunity is to demonstrate that the rule of law is not a constraint, but that it delivers in practice. Because investors don't want the world to stand still. Actually, investors are always looking to change the world, but they do require it to move in ways that they can understand, anticipate, and trust. And I think one of the problems we have, and I saw it in the last panel, 3 years ago, the EU were talking about digital transformation, and they still haven't actually decided on the legislation. And yet, digital transformation is happening now. And what it was like 3 years ago is not the situation we face today. So we need to have a system, a rule of law, that is flexible enough to allow change to happen and predictable enough to allow people to be secure in the trust that they have in the system.
Excellent. I think what I'm hearing is a very clear message. We're talking about trust, we're talking about ecosystems, we're talking about rule of law. Things which may feel conceptual, but actually they're not. They're not conceptual and theoretical and certainly not academic. They are things which very much determine the specific realities in which the operators come in. So actually, let me move then for something very specific, since we are sitting in a, we have spoken about hospitality, achievements, etc. Manfredi, you look after some of the world's most successful hospitality and tourist activities. Now, if we look at the international travel sector, it seems to me that it's increasingly becoming polarized, if I may so, between the high volume activities on the one side and then the very premium experience driven segment on the other side. So from the region, where do you see this particular region going? And how would both the investors and the region relate to that segmentation?
Well, thank you for the question. So
Clearly, myself as an entrepreneur, I am in the high segment. As chairman of the WTTC, we overview the entire industry. So clearly, there's a very strong polarization, big numbers growing in the mass market. The growth of the high level market is much stronger. So it has a lot of perspective. In general, you have to look at where you are, your starting point, like a businessman would do. What do I have? What are the opportunities? The competitive scenario. So, what is the competitive scenario around Montenegro? And how can you go where you think there's more to be achieved? I had some conversations this morning with Rikard, yesterday with the people here. And you start from a point where you already have something going on. It could be much more, but there's something. Then you have to choose which direction you want to do and what is necessary to go in that direction. So there's one direction, which is more selective access, higher spenders coming. It has a lot of benefits, of course. It has less impact on the local life. It protects authenticity of the destination. You are competing with others. If you're in the mass market, it is, of course, more impactful, less competitive, I would say. You have many Sharm el Sheikh everywhere. But you have a few Sardinia. You don't have many Saint-Tropez or Cannes, where my friend is opening. So he has a remarkable brand, one of the best in the world. And he's choosing, cherry picking places which focus on his kind of market, because you know that you build brick by brick. You cannot be a lonely player unless you're in a very remote destination. You can be a lonely player in the high-end sector. You have to be surrounded by, as Rich was saying, a complexity of events which go in the same direction. And it is everything. It's the starting point, beauty of nature, history, local culture, weather, of course, and then what you build, the infrastructure you build, accessibility, shopping experiences, golf, and whatever, which also allow to expand the season. So you really need a master plan. What do I want to achieve? And to achieve that, what do I put together? What builds into that? If I would have an Amos Beach here, it would become immediately like Mykonos has the Amos Beach, Montenegro has.
We're opening.
No?
We're opening this summer, Ramos.
You're
Beach.
here.
Yes.
Yes, because next 1 month. But now,
Exactly.
recently,
Yes.
last
this
time I came, you weren't.
Yes.
So you see, you add on Amman,
exactly.
fantastic brand, Ramos, fantastic brand. Of course, Kotor, which is a fantastic destination, is a bit inflated now. So you need to pick. So I was speaking, there are other villages, towns, which are still quite pristine. And around them, you can probably build something which can cater to people like myself. When I go around with my boat, I want to go to places which, are more authentic, where you still have the local cuisine. I don't want to go in a town where they serve fake spaghetti. I want to go to a town where they serve good, authentic local food. Because that is, or I have some very prestigious international restaurant, which gives an international view. But one of the two things, the thing in the middle doesn't help. So it's really that kind of planning. So on my ships, what do? How do I build up the perception that my ships are the best in the industry, which they are? I build them through quality of the asset, of course, where the asset goes, of course. Best food, best service. I help myself with good brands. I have Nobu, I have Beef Bar, and so on. I would like to have other good brands on board. That helps. My product has to be good by itself. But putting myself next to other good brands, the fact that those good brands choose me as a ship is an endorsement.
Mm.
And so that is a very, very important point. You build it up. You should take the experience of a cruise ship and say, how do you build the experience of a upscale cruise line? And that's the model. And also shops. I saw you have some great shops here in this location. That also helps. So all of that is the building of the.
I hear a very clear message here about clarity, and I hear a very clear message also about authenticity. That clarity must be real. It's not just clarity on paper and great policy statements. I also hear a lot of optimism and positive statements in the room, and particularly about Montenegro, I think is fair to say. So Minister, let me then ask this. So you are further ahead than many of your neighbors on the EU accession. So great progress. But I also get a clear message of a significant lack of patience, not with Montenegro, but certainly with capital, generally speaking. In concrete terms, there's been a lot of positive movement, but in terms of permitting timelines, land rights, investor guarantees, putting in place a predictable environment. Looking at where we are today compared to, say, 5 years ago, what has changed?
Well, let me say that capital may be, as you said, impatient, but capital is very, very much strategic also vis-a-vis our imminent accession to the EU. And let me be very clear that this government has made EU accession its absolute priority. That is, and this is just not a declaratory goal, so to say, but it is a systematic reform process. And I can assure you that every ministry within this government is engaged, fully engaged, in aligning with legislation and the EU acquis. And of course, Parliament is actively adopting those laws. But legislation alone is not sufficient, and we are fully aware of that. And the real shift is in implementation. And that means ensuring that the rules are predictable, enforceable, and applied consistently in practice. So on your question, what fundamentally changed compared to 5 years ago, I can say it is the investment paradigm. Why? Previously, investors often depended on direct engagement with decision makers to move projects forward. But our objective is to establish a transparent, rules-based system where investors can operate without discretionary bottlenecks. In concrete terms, and in concrete on what you asked, on permitting, for example, we are streamlining procedures and aligning them with EU standards so to reduce uncertainty and timeliness. On land rights, we are actively addressing what we call legacy issues that are related particularly to the conversion and clarification of property titles to provide legal certainty for the investors. And on the investors' guarantees, the shift is toward a predictable legal framework that is anchored in EU rules, rather than case-by-case assurances. So our EU accession path is central to all of this, and I think that I made it quite clear. By closing negotiation chapters, we are effectively building a market that mirrors the European Union standards with the clear objective of becoming part of the single European market. For investors, this means a very simple principle. If you meet EU standards, you can operate in Montenegro under those same standards, but with significantly reduced friction. That is the fast track that we are creating. And at the same time, until full EU membership is achieved, Ministry of Public Works is taking a proactive role in facilitating strategically important infrastructure projects, particularly those that contribute to economic development and acceleration of our EU integration. So to my initial point that the capital is being rather strategic as to our EU membership, I would say that the current investment cycle indicates that the timing for influx of capital in Montenegro and to Montenegro is just right. And rather than there is uncertainty or hesitation on the part of the investors. So if you want me to wrap it up in one sentence, I would say, and put it like this, now is the time to buy our stock.
Excellent. Thank you so much. But I think definitely I buy. But I also think that you put something which is very important in my confidence of buying, which is this is actually not just aspirational. This is also being addressed in a very systemic manner across the full institutional structure, so to speak, because we started off talking about predictability. The flip side of that is, of course, the uncertainty.
Exactly.
Every government that I have interacted with have been able to tell a fantastically good story. Sometimes it has looked different on the ground. Alfredo, as an investor, there is always the flip side of the coin, which is the risk evaluation. What do the investors actually think about the Adria region? Not when they're sitting on panels, but when they are having a conversation in closed doors with each other. What does the risk profile look like?
Premium you assess on your life. What is a premium? Your premium on a risk. Fundamentally is that number, that equation for those the technical matters that normalize, the uptaking of a risk. So what you're willing to normalize for this function. What is this risk? This risk is the uncertainty that you produce over a cycle of execution. I have 6 years, 7 years, 9 years, policymakers change, policy change. There are different cycles with different risks. To go one step into this, how do you address this risk? Leaving aside the mathematical formula, by filling the gap. Because you have cycles in which uncertainty will happen, for which you are willing to price it, but you need to fill the gap. How do you fill the gap? You fill the gap only in one way, and this is our experience as an investor in Montenegro, by having an honest and strategic consortium between a private capital and the institution. No, old quote says that you need to be to tango. So, and I must say that this government and the Prime Minister, Her Excellency the Minister, has been really a talented partner. And what does this mean, having a tango together? Because I want to be really drawing down into something which is effective, pragmatic. What does it mean? Meanings that a Manfredi Stefan reopens, iconic, a vision. A Manfredi Stefan is a vision, it's not an investment. Is that legacy capital that the minister was talking before? Is a legacy capital. The moment that a Manfredi Stefan reopens, spoiler, Namus Beach will open. My friend Manfredi is a good, estimator of the brand. I give you another spoiler. Zuma will open in the same premises. Global brand. You keep fostering that vision, you keep fostering that welcoming ecosystem where you start to normalize the risk, reduce the premium, becomes more competitive as an economy. Further step, when all this ecosystem is finalized and that vision kept fostered, we go for step 2, which is a Janu by a man, which will be continued, be built in the historical Milosev part. Another $250 million investment. More vision, more jobs, less risk, more world mapping for all these high-end clients, and even really sentiment of belongship from the people that live in Montenegro, that they have this kind of ecosystem. Because if you look at the Adriatic and you go all the way down to the Mediterranean, and I'm a Montenegrin, I says, where do I find Aman, Namos, Zuma, One and Only, and all these brands respectfully the legislation, looking at strategic point altogether. I answer for you, nowhere. Only Montenegro. You don't find them nowhere, not in Greece, nor in Turkey, nor in Albania, nor in Croatia, nowhere. And that's for me the competitive advantage set, where you become from an intuitive economy with good exploit, like Manfredi was saying, you can be an amazing brand somewhere alone, fantastic, but you're just one. Then you become a competitive economy. And a competitive economy, you become by attracting and nesting at very and always degrading premiums, activities who are mostly and should be long-term legacy activities.
I think that's a very strong endorsement of the systemic approach that the minister was highlighted. Now, Alfredo, one thing, of course, you say that the risk, and then you point to the sort of the structural, the professional way of assessing the risk and managing the risk. The reality is also, of course, that money follows money. Capital goes where capital already is. So I think, sort of with that in mind, let me go to you, Richard. As you said, the global capital tends to go where the global capital already is. Now, if you are a region like the Adria, we have fantastic opportunities, but you have had some challenge in attracting that capital. How do you break through this? How do you actually raise up your head and show a different story so that the capital is also diverted into something which may be much more attractive, but not necessarily what is spoken about in every room?
Yeah, you're right. Capital is magnetic. So, but let's first put something in perspective. I'm hearing too often, there is no more cash, there is no more money. There is a lot of cash and there is a lot of money. I will give you some data. In 2025, the foreign direct investment represented $1.6 trillion. 1.6 trillion. 400 billion went to America. 400 billions were invested in Europe. So we should stop to think that Europe is over, because I'm hearing more and more Europe is over. 500 billion went to Asia. 70 billion went to Africa, which is a pity. Because Africa is the first reservoir of potential investment. And I'm not saying that because I was born in Morocco. I'm saying that because it is a fact. The largest reserve of mining, of opportunities, 1.3 billion people. Why people are not going to Africa? Precisely, I will answer to your question about what should we do to break the rules. And last but not least, only 150 billion are going to Latin America. Also the same reason. So now to answer to your point about how to break the rules. Number one, I think it's important, maybe you should hire, not because she's next to me, Cherie Blair and Tony Blair together. I'm not kidding. Because they will advise you on how to bring new policies and new rules. Because you allow us to be provocative. There is United Kingdom before Tony Blair, and there is United Kingdom after Tony Blair. This is my humble opinion. Point number one. So you need to definitely have the right policies and to be sure that you can, again, build the right framework for investment. Number two, you need to promote your talents. Small is beautiful. If you look at a country like Montenegro, I'm extremely impressed by the quality of the women in Montenegro. Forget the men for now. No, I'm not kidding, and I'm not here to flatter them. Extremely talented women, very strong women, and believe me, there is a tendency to trust more women than men.
Rightly so.
No, I mean it. You need to promote the fact that there is no corruption, zero tolerance for corruption. A small country like Rwanda attracted so much investment. Tony knows very well Rwanda. When you leave the airport, you have billboards all the way to the city. These billboards are not promoting Coca-Cola or McDonald's. Investment, yes, corruption, no. Investment, yes, corruption, no. This is building trust. And then you deal with people who, even if it's a small country, because if you look at the small countries who are attracting so much investment, Singapore, Hong Kong, Bahrain, Luxembourg, So just look at these countries and you will learn from the best practices of these countries.
I think that's fantastic, and I think this audience in particular will very much resonate with what you said. Europe is not over.
It's not over at all, and we are hosting, and I hope that Biljana will be one of our partners, an FII Europe conference in Roma in June, what we will call the Europe Renaissance, because Europe will be back and Europe is still what it is. Amazing DNA, amazing talent, a lot of opportunities, and an amazing, which is very important for investor, quality of life. You don't invest in a country where you send your employees, your expat, if you don't have a great healthcare system, a great quality of life, and a great infrastructure. Europe has that. Europe is missing one thing: leadership. And this country has a strong leadership. This is also another asset to promote.
There is one area where Europe will say that it has got fantastic leadership, which is, of course, sustainability, and a very strong sustainability angle. And I think, as you are also referencing Africa, I see huge both opportunities but also challenges for the African subcontinent in terms of sustainability. But we went on a very strong trajectory of codifying sustainability. There was a very strong policy drive for this, etc. And then of recent, let's say that there has been quite some challenge to the whole concept of sustainability. Cherie, I mean, how would you operate in this space between the reality and the codification as well? How do you see this challenge? Is sustainability now dead, or does it still feature as an important part?
Well, you know, what's in a name, a rose by any other name can smell as sweet. There is this kind of political disagreement, particularly across the Atlantic, between ESG. But, you know, in the end, it's just rhetoric, because ESG is a title, but it's really about risk and resilience. And it's about substance, not rhetoric. And the reason, you know, if sustainability is branding, then it's vulnerable. But if it's about strategy, then it's indispensable. So we shouldn't argue about the words. We should actually look about the substance beneath it. And the question about the substance is to minimize risk exposure. Things happen. It's important to have a framework that recognizes that. And I think for a moment, we mentioned Sveti Stefan. I'm obsessed with Sveti Stefan. The first time I came to Montenegro was when I came to a conference there. It's an amazing place, and yet the tragedy of it being shut for so long. Part of ESG is about ensuring that you take the community with you. And so, to some extent, it's an example, really, of what happens if, while saying we're going to be able to privatize the beaches, we don't explain to the people and take the people along why they're not simply losing out, but why they are actually gaining from an ecosystem which will attract the growth and investment that everyone will benefit from. And sustainability is all about that. It's about recognizing it's not just what you write down in the legislation, it's how that legislation is embedded and how it's sold to the community. I think the other thing we have to think about when we're talking about this rhetoric, we're seeing in Europe, yes, a more insistence on diligence, more accountability and disclosure. And there's no doubt at all that is reflecting what the concern that the public has. And this is a good thing in one sense, but it's not a good thing if it leads to, again, SASIS, where we heard it in the last panel. Think about AI. Again, AI is moving so quickly that if you attempt now to regulate every single little detail about what's happening today, by the time you've managed to get all that through the various systems, those details will be irrelevant because capital technology has moved on. So we have to find a way of balancing how we can set guardrails and parameters that protect the public without stifling the innovation and just the speed of transformation that is happening, because we want to attract that capital into Europe. And if we are too restrictive in how we set these guardrails, then we're going to lose out. So I really think there needs to be a reconfiguration, and hopefully that's being thought about how we get that flexibility. Let's not try and regulate for everything. Let's set some general principles and then allow the market to work within those general principles to achieve the progress and the investment that we all seek, in at the same time explaining to the public why this is going to be in their best interest and not just in the interests of rich multi-billionaires. Naming no names, but you know who I mean.
I think, unfortunately, our time is running out. But before I leave the stage, I just want to ask very, very quickly. Montenegro is advancing very fast, very systemically. Going back to Manfredi and the hospitality sector as well. So that sounds to me that there is an opportunity here to move from a just seasonal summer beach, that's it, and move into something more long-term, holistic, sustainable, where this sector can actually be active throughout the whole year. If you were to point out one specific item, it's an evil question, but just one thing that could make the distinction between just the seasonal tourism and moving into a more holistic year-long destination, what would be that one thing, if it's possible to identify it?
It depends where you are. So here, there are things which people like to do beyond the good weather season. I don't do sports, but for example, golf is a great thing. There are people that travel for golf and they go into places. You have to look at the things which are done by people not in the typical summer season, not connected to the beach. That's what you have to look at, and there's plenty to be done. So more this hiking. You have beautiful mountains. I've not been. I cannot hike. But I mean, I imagine that for hikers, people go to Bhutan to do hiking. So why not here? So I know that is fantastic. Just one comment. Richard, you were saying Europe is not gone this year. I would say if you look at where Europe was and where it is now, we've lost a lot of room. That doesn't mean that we do not have room to go back. So we should look at what went wrong. So since Mr. Blair, whom we all admire, I think there's been too much ideology. We've killed our automotive industry. We've killed our chemical industry. If we go on this way, we'll kill everything. We have to change. Montenegro is a clear case of very focused leadership, where it can balance between the various instances, but protecting the economical environment. I hear only people from the chemical industry, they say, I'm going to shut down, I'm moving to the States. Cost of energy in Europe is 5 times Europe. I cannot operate here. Car industries, we've lost the battle with the Chinese because we're forced to do renewable electric engines, which people do not want to buy. We killed our car industry. How many industries more do we want to kill? So travel is still prosperous. Don't kill it. Please, don't kill it.
I don't think people don't want to buy electric cars. It was just there was not enough infrastructure to enable them to charge those cars. I think that's a bit. Honestly, I don't think people are so convinced about a petrol engine being some kind of marvelous thing. People just want to move around. If we had the infrastructure to support electric cars, people would buy electric cars.
Go and talk with the people who run Stellantis, and they're going to tell you what their future is.
But before maybe we hear from the minister, I think Europe is missing courage. Missing courage. And I think Montenegro could use the courage of its leader. And I had yesterday the privilege to have a dinner next to the minister. I think she's a very courageous woman. And I think she will maybe tell us why countries like this with courage can achieve a lot. Because we are missing courage in general in Europe.
I have to give the minister the final remark, because what I'm hearing is Europe is not gone. but there is need for change, and maybe some of the smaller nations are actually going to serve as that inspiration to the broader system. So, Minister, very briefly, any parting remarks?
This minus is killing me actually in the timeline. But yes, maybe the change necessary to the Europe is the courage of the small nations like Montenegro. So to wrap it up, we are heading to the EU, definitely. We are part of the Europe, definitely. And with the courage of this small nation, we will do our best to enhance the growth in every possible way. Thank you.
Thank you.